So Nike carried an ad on Japanese social media, and there were backlash from the some Japanese Twitter users, and I was really amazed because for me the Nike commercial was really wonderful, and as a Nike fan, I loved the brand all the more for this commercial, which pointed out some issues of discrimination and bullying and so on in Japanese society, and how Nike lauded the spirit of sport in which people can express their individuality freely and in a productive way. So I think Nike did a great service to the Japanese society with this ad. So I am a supporter of Nike, and I would continue to be so. But it's interesting that the way the Japanese media, the traditional media, newspapers and TV, reacted to this dispute on social media. And one of the problems I think is that in any nation there are people who take issues about being criticized. In the United States, I'm sure there are people who would regard any social criticism as anti-American. There are these people in the UK. I think there are these people. In France, there will be these people, and in China, there would be a lot of these people. But so in Japan, we do have these people, and but that's normal. That's quite, not something that we wouldn't expect. What you wouldn't expect, actually, about this reaction of the traditional Japanese media is that they tend to regard the Japanese public as something homogeneous. So it's a social disease, I feel like, inherent in the traditional Japanese media, which is accustomed to think the Japanese population as something that would possess only one opinion at a time. Infamously, the traditional Japanese media, including the Asahi Shimbun, which is regarded as liberal and something equivalent to the New York Times in the U.S., and even the Asahi Shimbun, went on a campaign of urging the government to go on war with the U.S. and other nations in the run-up to the Second World War. So there is this tradition of the Japanese media to regard the public as something coherent, something homogeneous, and do not regard any division within it as important. So their mindset is always this majority and minority, majority versus minority framework. So in that particular framework, I think there's this tendency in the Japanese media to regard any backlash, in this case, against the Nike ad, as something coming from the general opinion, if there is a one, of the Japanese public. So in this particular backlash and controversy regarding the Japanese, social media reaction to the Nike ad, of course there are heterogeneities. And I'm pretty sure that there are many, many Japanese people out there who actually sympathized with the main messages of the Nike ad, like I am doing. And there, of course, there are people who, have emotional issues with this ad. Those are people who cannot take criticisms at their face value and, regard any criticism as anti-Japanese. And there are all these people. And it'll be interesting to, take a survey and, analyze which demographic subset of the Japanese people reacting in which manner. But the Japanese media traditionally do not do that because, even in political polls, like the approval rating of the Suga government, for example, they do not take demographic parameters into consideration, like the educational level, whether they are college undergraduate or graduate school, PhD, and all these things, and social economic factors like household income and all these things. Or they even don't consider the heterogeneity in terms of prefectures. There could be different opinions depending on the geographic locations that you are in Japan. The analysis of political opinions state by state is something of the norm in the United States, but something almost unheard of in Japanese media, because they start from this assumption that Japanese people are homogeneous. So in this particular case, the way the traditional Japanese media, newspapers and TV, are reporting on this so-called backlash to the Nike ad suffers from this disease, social disease, if I may say so, of assuming homogeneity in the Japanese public, which is not actually homogeneous. So unless the Japanese traditional media discard this false assumption of homogeneity, they cannot start a variable job of analyzing the complex socio-economical and psychological factors that go into such a reaction to the Nike ad, which I love.